So good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome to our panel, where our focus is on incubators, accelerators, and new models. And I'm joined by a panel of great experts in this area who will be sharing their perspectives on this topic. And we'll start off with really quick introductions. My name is Rebecca Yu. I head up JLabs here in Toronto, and we've got two of our team members here up front. And for those of you who don't know, JLabs is Johnson & Johnson's no-strings-attached incubator for early-stage life sciences startups. And we just launched our 6th site, the first international site outside the US, so we're very excited to be here. And I'm just going to pass the introductions over to Christopher.
Chris Kim, and I'm a managing partner of Korea Soul Life Science Fund, which we put together a few years ago. And when we put it together in Korea, at the time, it was the largest ever dedicated biotech VC fund in Korea. Very early stage focused. We have 20 portfolio companies right now for that fund. And also recently in Toronto, I'm based in Boston, by the way. So we have office in South Korea, Seoul, and we have an office in Hong Kong. And most recently, we have put together an accelerator here in Toronto. It's called Innovation Ventures, and I'm a partner there. Currently, we're employing a virtual model, but then we're working on our first model, and that's a project that's coming out of local university.
Diane Carmichael, for those who don't know, I'm currently at MaRS, Managing Director of Health, and the executive lead bringing RESI to MaRS with our partners JLabs and LSN. We are, for those who don't know, the largest urban innovation hub in North America. And we'll talk, I think, a little bit later about some of the things that we do in the programs. So I wear multiple hats. A lot of what we're talking about and what's I'm passionate about is bringing investors and matching investor and capital with some of this great innovators and entrepreneurs. So this was an attempt to be able to do that in a bigger, broader way. So welcome to those who are either from the current, the local ecosystem, but also people from around the world coming, which is great. And then I wear another hat as being on the investment side, and I will be, for those who don't know, I will be leaving MaRS, and I'll be heading up a new opportunity starting tomorrow. So I thought I would mention that for some of those people who are friends of mine who are not sure, but I'll be joining Eugene Melnick and creating an investment fund on the stock exchange. So we'll be investing in technology companies, as well as a fund in the organ donation and organ transplant and all the interesting technologies there that we're investing in. So that's it.
Hi, I'm Gordon Kurtenbach. I guess since Diane said she was leaving MaRS, I'll have to start with saying, well, I'm coming to MaRS in January 2017. But I'm with a company called Autodesk, and Autodesk, we make software for people who make things. So these are typically, in the past, they've been architects, engineers, inventors, and designers. And more in the future, we're seeing people from the life sciences. We've all seen sort of the digitization of life as we know it. And so at Autodesk, we're really interested in that sort of thing. So we make software, like we made the software that designed this building, that designed the Tesla car, that designed the iPhone that's in my pocket. We're also experimenting with software to do genomic design too. So you sort of get a range of the things that we're interested in. And so ultimately, we want to help and work with people who want to imagine and design and create a better world. And so I'm here because I want to sort of open my hands and say, okay, you guys, we're moving to MaRS. Please drop by and let's compare notes.
Thank you. So I'm Linda Maxwell. I'm the founding and managing director of the Biomedical Zone, which is an incubator / accelerator. It's founded at Ryerson University, which is pretty much one of the top innovation and entrepreneurial universities in Canada. It's amongst the top. It's a joint partnership, the Biomedical Zone, between Ryerson University and St. Michael's Hospital, which is part of the University of Toronto hospital system. It's a downtown urban tertiary care and acute care hospital, provincial referral center for trauma, robust research division. And in fact, I think we're actually the first physician-led hospital-based incubator in this country. We focus on med tech and software. We do have some outliers in biomaterials and in biotech, but we're largely sort of med tech and software focused. Because we're part of Ryerson University, we also have an education agenda where we focus on experiential learning, which is hands-on, project-based experience, and hands-on learning for Ryerson students. In general, they tend to be senior level biomedical engineering students and computer science students. That's pretty much it. I do this, and in my other spare time, I'm a practicing surgeon.
So our first question for the panelists, we'll start with Christopher. How is your group helping early stage companies in your portfolio navigate the investment process? And what are the challenges and opportunities?
So I can speak on two different sort of contexts. One is the Korea Fund, and the other is Innovation Ventures here in town. And so for the Korea Fund, what we did was, it was very early stage focused, and when we set it up again, it was the first dedicated, largest fund in Korea, biotech fund. And one of the projects that we did was we we identified a very, very interesting scientific platform coming out of like top Korean university. And as it occurs often in emerging geographies, one of the things that are lacking is source of financing, and as well as experienced professionals who can basically start from NUCO and then all the way to take it to whatever the finish line may be. So on the latter, what we did was on this project we brought in an EIR, entrepreneur in residence from Boston. So he was non-Korean, he's Irish, but then he became an American, and he's very experienced. So he had founded and built his company and sold to Novartis for $300 million. So he was very, very experienced. And what we did was we brought in him to Korea, and he didn't have to spend all his time in Korea, but he would go there like 6, 7, 8 times a year, and he started to put together a company in Korea. And premise was that when the NUCO came into a certain level of shape, meaning that it had met certain set of milestones that our fund had initially set, then our fund would invest along with other co-investors that we would be able to bring in, including domestic local investors and outside Korea. So that was one. And the other is, as I said, we have another activity going on here, which is an accelerator, and currently it's a virtual accelerator, meaning that the first project that we are working on, we are licensing that project into a NUCO, and so it's coming from a local university in Ontario. And it so happened that this project is a research technology, it's discovery technology, and based on our network and experience and my partner's network and experience, what we are going to do is we are going to finish licensing agreement with the university, put it into NUCO, and then, so a lot of work has been done, but then now the next level of work has to be done through the potential customers, which are basically big pharmas. So we are playing the role, which is, we have people in big pharma that we know, like so-called friends and contacts. So what we are doing is we are running this project by big pharma, and then trying to get this project taken up by pharma so that they would first at least test it in their discovery unit, and then hopefully we'll be able to put together a revenue model that might be specific for each pharma customers to take it from there. So that's where we come in. So we provide both a managerial experience, and we provide, just like any other investors, network into their potential customer pool. And at times we find and we literally bring in EIR to a project so that he or she can take it to a more mature level.
So one of the things that we've done is to put a more rigorous process around that, and I brought someone in with a tremendous background whose role it is to do due diligence on the companies that we represent, so proper due diligence. And we wanted to do due diligence that also matched what many of the investors are looking at, and creating our networks around those investors, so that when MaRS calls, and it's a sort of a MaRS portfolio client, that they'll sit up and listen. They know that we've done our homework. As well, we've just recently brought on an expert, Bernie Lee, who has a significant background, and he is going to manage some of the investor relationships as well, so he'll be working on that as a full commitment. We're doing things like RESI at MaRS and our partnership again with JLabs and with LSN to try to bring more investors to the community and really talk about that and raise the profile of health and life sciences in this area. And we also do things to help some of the portfolio companies to prepare for the investment process, because many of them are not experienced or they haven't had success. So we have programming where we help them with their pitch decks and how to pitch, the kinds of things that they need to do. As well as a little bit of a unique one. We recently had Mark Bowden, who's a friend of mine, but he's also one of the top body language experts in the world. He works with all the G7 leaders in terms of their presentation skills. So I just really wanted to elevate the kinds of ways that we present so that you know, we don't get trapped by not using the right body language, and you know, we can project our voices and those sort of, so it's little subtle things that people forget about and I think that we overlook. As well as the other ways that we're doing is trying to collaborate, try to collaborate with other innovation hubs, other partners, and if we're bringing some investors, that we would reach out to them and have them also bring some of their companies. We work with a lot of partners at MaRS. We've got a lot of corporate partners. Many of them have corporate money, investment funds that they're using, and so we spend a lot of time curating the companies to make sure that we're matching the right companies with the capital, and I think that that's really critical. Gone are the days of just throwing these poor fundraising CEOs in front of a whole lot of organizations that don't have any intention of doing anything with them. So we really want to make sure that on both sides of the fence we have that matched. So, back to what do we do to help with investment. MaRS does have a couple of investment funds as well. So we have the IAF, which will invest in early stage companies, and we have the Center for Impact Investing, which is investing in things that will have some social impact. So I just thought I'd better mention that as well.
There's sort of, I think, kind of 4 ways to attach yourself to Autodesk funding. The one way is a fairly direct way. We build platforms so people can build design tools. And we also fund people to be startups to utilize that platform. That's a $100 million fund. And you can apply, you can make a pitch online. And so that's one way to go about getting funding. And typically the way you approach that actually, you could start out by using Autodesk tools, and maybe you find it's a very repetitive way that you have to use them, and you actually want to sort of systematize that. So that's a very strong story to Autodesk, like, hey, these guys are using our tools. They actually want to make this into a business of using it over and over again. So that's sort of a good way to get in. The other way is through the Autodesk Foundation, which is more about supporting nonprofits, but not exclusively nonprofits. And they tend to work on things that are using design tools for the public good. Like we've funded people actually here at Naya Technologies here in Toronto who developed a way of doing a way to produce prosthetics in Africa using 3D printing. So it was a manufacturing process. And the foundation, I think, gave them $100,000 to sort of get them up and going. So that's another way in. A third way in is through my group. I'm the head of Autodesk Research, and the way that works is essentially, we develop a relationship and we understand what you're trying to do technically and in your business, and we advise you like, hey, this is what you could do, this is how it fits. And that's one of the great things about Autodesk is we have this group that's sort of a landing strip for people who don't really know how their stuff would fit in, but they sort of know that maybe they could use help from us. And we're capable of doing sort of research level, we can do research publications and do joint research. You can focus, let's say, on your expertise in life sciences, and we can focus on our expertise in software and design. and get access to some of the most advanced design tools in the universe. And then the final way is we go to the CEO and ask him to buy your company or something, or give the cash. And that works quite easily, especially if you go through Autodesk Research, because then we're sort of the guys pitching it for you. And we've done that a few times, you know, in the past. So those are the 4 ways.
Thank you. So I'll break it up into internal and external and what we do to support investment and pre-investment, quite frankly. So because we're a hospital-based incubator, we spend a lot of time working on clinical validation and clinical acceleration. So many of you may have heard of the DMZ, formerly the Digital Media Zone. It's a very successful incubator housed at Ryerson. We're spun out of the DMZ, which has a very proven track record in fundraising, in nurturing startup companies. And so we are able to leverage a lot of that asset and resource in terms of investor contacts, pitch coaching, pitch events, you know, networks, advisors. But in the biomedical zone, we spend a lot of time accelerating health companies in the hospital environment, in the clinical environment. So we spend a great deal of our focus is getting clinicians involved with the technology to not just look at the clinical outcomes, but the business case validation. And we actually have a pilot program that we're running at St. Michael's Hospital with a company that is a graduate out of the DMZ, a very high-performing company, to put it in the hands of the key clinical champion to pilot it with nurses, patients, because this is how hospitals work. As someone who's worked in hospitals for many, many years, you can have the best technology, but if you don't have the right people championing it, using it, willing to go to bat for it, it's not going to go anywhere. So we're able to do that at very low cost and on short timelines, which to me in healthcare is the key to being able to garner investment if you can prove both the clinical and the business case. And by business case, I mean things like interruption in workflow or improvement in workflow, cost, efficiency, nursing deployment, things that don't necessarily come out in your typical assessment of a business case. But Ryerson Futures, which is the investment arm for Ryerson University, is part of our machinery. They assess our companies when they apply. They work with our companies on a monthly basis in terms of check-in. So there is an opportunity to leverage the fund. I mean, if a company is good enough and meets their investment criteria, then there's a natural progression for companies to have investment from Ryerson Futures. And that also brings it a signal to other investors and other angels and VCs once RFI has invested. From an external standpoint, we have a closed environment in terms of we're able to host a number of investors, both through my own personal network and the network of the DMZ and Ryerson and other people. So we bring in certain types of investors to actually have one-on-one demonstrations with our companies that fit the investment thesis of that particular group, and we do a lot of that. So we attack it from many angles, but our real focus is getting companies ready and validated from a clinical standpoint, which is a very, very high barrier for lots of companies.
Thank you. Second question, with the growing trend in a number of accelerators and incubators in life sciences, how do you see these groups collaborating together in the future?
So, I guess my answer is making sure that co-investors or strategic partners are sort of aligned relative to where this company is going. It's very, very important to us.
In terms of, with incubators and accelerators, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,500 of them in North America. But I would argue that many of them don't last. They haven't found a business model that's going to work for them in terms of helping companies, and many of them, well-meaning, wanting to be helpful, but aren't necessarily equipped to really help companies that need to grow and scale. So I think that what we need to do is make sure that we're adding the right value for the organizations that we represent, and that we create the right unique selling proposition, understand what our unique selling proposition is, and really focus a little more narrowly on that and make sure we're delivering. And there are others in the ecosystem that may be able to help in other areas where we're not necessarily as strong. So what I've tried to do, we host some regular events where we get people in the ecosystem ecosystem, that they're in the incubation, innovation hub, whatever you want to call it, and really understand what they're all doing, how we can work and play together, how we can, together more collaboratively help these companies, in particular around the investment side. So an example of the J Labs, the great stuff that they're doing, we've got a pretty good partnership with them. They do some exceptional things, and we don't want to step on each other's toes, so we really look at making sure that we're aligned and that we can help each other and trade off. We want to do the same thing with everyone else.
The one really successful program is this program called Scholar in Residence, or Researcher in Residence, and basically you take time off from your regular job and you come and work for Autodesk for a while, but not as an employee. Your IP is separated, so you don't share any of your IP with Autodesk, but you get access to the experts at Autodesk. So we're capable of doing that sort of thing. The other thing that Autodesk has been really good at is sort of positioning ourselves into a community, sort of opening up our doors in sort of a social sense and saying, come on over, let's get a social relationship first and sort of find out what's interesting to sort of all of us. And that's one of the reasons why when we're moving into the MaRS building here, we're actually taking that spot that's sort of on the lower level. It looks like a retail spot. And we'll run events like, we have this event series called Design Night. And that's basically just a get-together where we get a bunch of like-minded people on some topic. And we all get together and have drinks and stuff like that and talk about it. And that's paid off super dividends for people networking and stuff like that. So we established lots of different relationships through that. So that's, in a way, it's sort of an incubator without actually being an incubator sort of thing. So it's really an established social network.
Because we're part of two public institutions, so Ryerson and St. Michael's Hospital, we've had to be very collaborative from the very get-go. Our budgets are extremely lean. You may or may not know at Ryerson there are, I think, 10 innovation zones or almost mini incubators. And we've built our entity largely based on leveraging those resources. So from the very get-go, we have been tapping into what's in the DMZ, tapping into the design, to the transmedia zone, which focuses on AI and VR, tapping into the fabrication zone, which is all about 3D printing and various other types of activities like that. So that is sort of at our foundation. It's about collaboration. And going forward, what we have a number of collaborators already as it is. Again, because we're caught between two public institutions, it's part of our DNA in order to survive, and we see ourselves more as a tool for the institutions rather than attempting to become a sustainable business. This is not what this particular entity is about. Some, others are. There's a case for all different types of incubators, but this is much more a tool for the hospital and the university to problem solve in the hospital's case, and for the university, for their students to get exposure to entrepreneurship, and in some cases for the right kinds of technology to become companies and get spun out and go on in terms of commercial activity. I'm actually an advisor for MaRS Discovery District, and we have a number of collaborators throughout the biomedical zone, including MaRS Innovation. You probably know that most hospitals are members of MaRS Innovation, so they come around and they commercialize work that comes out of especially the research laboratories. So they carry on with their activities, and we're now looking at how we can tangibly collaborate. So when they do their investment and they put in all the resources, the company or the project needs somewhere to sit, needs somewhere to be further accelerated, things that an organization like MaRS Innovation can't do necessarily because it's not immersed in the hospital. So again, our focus is clinical acceleration, and we leave the other stuff to people who do it really well.
Thank you. I'm going to shorten the second question just for time reasons. So what are some new ideas or new approaches that you can think of for accelerators and incubators to work with investors to help early stage companies? Any new thoughts and new ideas and new approaches?
Well, I don't know if this is a new idea per se, but one project that we are working on right now, it's another NUCO project where imagine a piece of smart paper, which is a diagnostics device. So it's a very far out kind of project, and that's the kind of cool stuff that we like working on. But in order to do this, it actually involves 4 different labs. And then as we were writing business plan and as we were sort of testing the existing technology, IP and data, we realized that we have to have one more PI get involved from yet different institute into this project. So it's like 5 different labs and potentially co-founders. So that's very complicated. But that's what incubator sometimes have to do. And maybe you want to call that a new idea. So it gets originated from a certain university A, but then it so turned out that in order to incubate this in-house, you actually need to bring in different scientific expertise. So it actually ended up being incubated in a new code, but based on all these different technologies coming from different people. So that, what does that mean? That you have to do a licensing agreement and some sort of agreement, obviously, with all these different people, and things get more complicated. And so maybe that's a new model, but it's a project dependent, and that's something that just wanted to tell you that's something that we are doing.
Great, thanks. So I don't know. I have to think a little bit more about what would be sort of new and novel. But the area that I come back to a little bit when I came to MaRS 6 months ago or so, and realized that many of the innovators and incubators don't do due diligence. They're not setting milestones. They're not making sure that the companies are achieving those. That, to me, that was a huge gap, and it's one that I've seen repeated in so many others. And I think that for us to represent some of these companies and be taken seriously by investors, they want to know that we've done our due diligence, properly due diligence, that we've set milestones, that they've met those, that the fundraising CEOs, when they go in, are prepared and they have their decks down, and they're making sure that they're tailoring it to what that investor is looking for. So I just think that that's a really important thing to do, and for all of us collaborating together and trying to help this ecosystem to really lift itself. We need to be much more professional in the way that we approach that. And
I was going to say, I don't know if this is a new idea, but there are no new ideas, so I assume it's not. But the thing that I've seen in my experience work really well for us is when we have a combination of somebody with a new idea, and then we've had experiences where we've really validated and increased the quality of the idea by working with some big customer. So for example, we just did a project with Airbus about building super lightweight parts for them. And really, without them, we couldn't have approached that sort of level of competency with them, because they have these particular demands. And that's what you sort of see in the transition from sort of a small thing to something that really has real industrial strength hardened sort of thing, is the requirements of a really heavy project and stuff like that. So that sort of magic combination to bring that into a small startup venture, I think, is really, really great value. So obviously, if you see more of that, or there's some systemized way of looking at that, that has, in my experience, had a lot of value to it.
I don't know if this is sort of what you're looking for, but what we're trying to do based on the model we've designed and the interest from other hospitals in collaborating with us, which harkens back to the question before, the approach we'd like to take regarding new forms of investment, it's more of an in-kind model, but it's engaging other hospitals. I mentioned the pilot program that we do with specific types of technology that fit the strategic mission of a hospital, the patient population, the provider population. Figuring out that fit, and so we have technology that fits the St. Michael's Hospital model. It checks all the boxes for St. Michael's, which allows us to pilot the technology in the hospital at low cost and at short timelines. And they contribute a lot of the stuff they do. They comp it, they do it for free. I mean, there's always a little bit of a cost involved, but not nearly at the scale you would expect for a pilot study with a research report published in a high-end journal at the end that talks about both clinical case and the business case. So what I'd like to do, and what we're working towards, is a sort of a new investment model where the investors, as it were, are other hospitals, where we develop technology or we pilot technology that people are mutually interested in. The hospitals are interested in it, and they provide for us the research personnel, they allow us to partner with them to, for example, expand a pilot or test a technology that fits their mission, but may not necessarily be as aligned with St. Michael's. So basically broadening the landscape for piloting and for demonstrating clinical and business case validation. So it's slightly different, it's more of an in-kind thing, because there's a lot of cash everywhere, but it's really this, in healthcare, it's this hurdle around demonstrating, especially in this country, the value proposition to the individual hospital.
Great, thank you. So we're going to open it up to questions to the audience. Our panelists, any questions? 10 minutes, so.
You mentioned there's too many incubators in the city, and I've noticed that there isn't anything for the step that goes after the incubator, or very little. So what could be done, I don't know for incubators, but what could be done to set up that next step? Because I see all these companies being formed, and they have nowhere to go after them.
I think that there are organizations that do fill some of those gaps. So at MaRS, as an example, we're really not an incubator. Again, that's left to some of the others that are out there. So we've focused on accelerating companies, the ones that have proven that there's a market for what they have. They might already have generating some revenue, hopefully, but that we think has the right management team, and we've done all of that. So those are the ones that we want, those growth companies. I mean, that's the area that we're really focused on, and it's not incubation. And if you're in the ideation stage, there's others that can help. We have some education programs you can go and do, and there's plenty of other incubators that can help. So I think that you just have to look at what's out there, but there are others. We're at the next stage, because I don't know if most of you know, but of the G8 countries, Canada is considered the most entrepreneurial of those. It's easier to start a company in Canada than it is virtually anywhere else in the developed nations. But we have a real problem with scaling. We don't scale. We don't kind of go beyond our borders. We're not taking it to the next level. That's where I see that MaRS and some of the things that I'm going to be doing in the future are really going to be focused on how you grow and scale around the world. I've done that, others in the room have done that, and we want to help more people to do it. So that's a piece that's missing.
What we have done, and we work closely obviously with MaRS, but what we've done as well, by virtue of the fact that we're so closely associated with the DMZ and Ryerson, which the DMZ has sort of an international profile with lots of accelerators, especially from the US, for better or for worse. Being very interested in what's going on there, we sort of ride a little bit on the coattails of the DMZ in terms of accessing the accelerators in the US, because until we sort of develop our own infrastructure for really adequate scaling of companies, early stage companies are going to go to the US anyway. So we try to be, not facilitators necessarily, but we try to be part of that dialogue and be part of the activity that's bound to happen anyway until we fully develop the scaling infrastructure in this country.
Interestingly, a place like Boston, where I'm coming from, there aren't that many incubators, and the reason is because the incubation is done by venture investors like us, and then no incubation is really sometimes done because there are a lot of experienced executives. So what they do is they just start a company and they just raise a fund and they just start from day one. So and then how do you, like, again, in my opinion, incubator's job is to let the company out the door after a certain period of incubation. And how do you sort of reduce the rate of failure of these companies going out the door? One way to do it is being more selective to begin with, but it sort of defeats the purpose of incubating a lot of projects. And I think it's a problem that incubator has suffered historically. But another way to do it is, like again in Boston, there are like commercial incubators, right? So these people make money by providing space and providing certain other sort of infrastructures, and then even if the resident company does not make it at the end. Along the way, these commercial incubators make money, so that's another model. But nonprofit incubator is a different story, like the regional incubators. So it's inherent that the attrition rate on this side is just very high.
A question here?
Love the idea around the due diligence. Of course, there's due diligence and then there's due diligence. So would the idea be to have different stages of due diligence matched to the level? And would that be a pro bono due diligence, or would there be a fee for it?
Well, in my world, I would like to charge for all kinds of things and take positions in the companies as well, but we don't do that at MaRS. So it is pro bono. It would be part of. So once you've gone through so we have a sort of selection process, right, to identify those companies, and the ones that the team feels are the ones that we're going to focus our time and energy on. And when we've gone through that process, then and then we will do the due diligence, and it depends on the stage, and we'll have to continue to update that depending where they're at, and also depending on where we think we need them to go for capital as well, because we want to match some of our due diligence process to that. And that will just be part of what we do. That's sort of our value add, that's part of the unique selling proposition, and it really is that our focus is accelerating growth companies that are going to grow and scale. So we have to do that to be credible. And if
I'm from Germany, from we represented the Charité University and Charité is a hospital college. I'm just wondering whether they interest in the international, talking about investors, whether they be interested in involving international investors, especially in the early stages of scaling and accelerating the companies. Any examples or any potential interest in any best cases, exactly Korean life science fund from the international partnership and collaboration with
Actually,
investors?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Actually, the project that we are incubating out of Ontario, we are actually bringing in international investor into it. So it's actually two of us. So international participation obviously is welcome all the time. And for the Korea Fund as well, one thing that we did was we actually brought in international investors into our projects, and that's what we see it was the significant value add. So there's no boundary, geographically speaking, in terms of bringing in investors and strategics.
And certainly at MaRS, that's a focus for us. We recognize, there is money here, although people don't think that there is. There is. We just need to change some attitudes a little bit. But it's really important. Most of our, health and technology companies end up having to go abroad to get some of that money. So we've developed those relationships. But MaRS is a place where we have, on a daily basis, trust me, on a daily basis, we have international delegations coming there. So we focus a lot on the international investment community, hence also why we've brought RESI here. That was one of the things, is to bring more of the international investors to bear. But we do now. We have investment groups from China, all kinds of other places where we are curating and we're preparing and we're putting our companies in front of them to pitch and to raise some capital. So, yeah.
So I think that's it for the panel, and I think